special visit from someone who has forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He's the great Michael Shure, everybody. Yes, sir. The Stanley Cup playoffs. Wow. Yeah, that's what you're about now. You're a big hockey guy.
They begin tomorrow. Yeah. I just
That's
learned
right.
that on a sports gambling radio show.
What?
Do you have before I get into the politics, do you have some tradition that you follow when you're watching the Stanley Cup playoffs? Do you?
Yes, that I follow it. I always remember having watched it with my dad. My late dad was a huge hockey fan, got me into hockey, and it was a ritual that when we were together, we always watched, and we would talk about the game afterwards on the phone. And, I love the Stanley Cup. And what this one, and then we'll get to politics, this one in particular is that Connor McDavid is the best hockey player in the world. And whenever you get a chance to watch someone who is the best at anything in the world, it's great to see. And, he plays on Pacific time in Edmonton. A lot of people don't watch it because a lot of people don't watch hockey to begin with. But the national stage and the international stage for him should, I would imagine, show people some pretty incredible hockey playing from the guy who really is. I think everybody believes he's the best in the world.
I was watching a little hockey the other night, and they have now the helmets and they have the padding, and I thought, wow, it really has evolved. I know but old school hockey, they were just guys with skates and little more than that and a stick.
Yeah, I would say it's been about 45 years since.
Well, you know what, Michael? That's still old school in my book because
it is. But I mean, helmets came along quite a while ago, and pads, okay. Mark.
You're saying I should let it go?
I would let that go.
Okay, all right. Hey, Michael, I'll get to the former President Trump in a moment because new polling that maybe accounts for, and I know you love polls. Saying that sarcastically, but
no, I do love polls. I just don't. They matter, at different times.
Right. Well, in the shadow of the guilty verdict, they did some polling. I'll finish this now since I've already started it, and it looks like there is some softness or some softening of support around Donald Trump. It may only be it's less than 10 percentage points, but. They did an interesting thing, and the New York Times did, and they don't. The New York Times sometimes does good things and sometimes does stuff that's just gross. But that said, they went back to many of the people who were polled in their other very high-profile poll from a few weeks ago, and they said, now that Trump has been found guilty, how do you feel about voting for him for president? Would you vote? And again, it was, I think it came out to about 7% said they would not. So you see, and based on a number of questions, it looked like his support was softening. Help me both with that and just how now that guilty verdict gets baked into what might happen in the election.
Well, I think one thing to remember is that the guilty verdict will be 6 months old by the time Americans go to vote for president in November. Many things are going to happen between now and then, and other things will impact people's decision making and the way they judge these two candidates and these four candidates. And so we don't know the fourth yet. We don't know who Trump's going to run with, but that will certainly impact at least a news cycle. But I think that what you're seeing is something we talked about last time, Mark, which is that there are some people who just find voting for a felon to be something they can't do. And it may not, like you said, be a lot of people, but there are certainly human beings and American human beings who are not sort of inclined to do that. And every, in a tight election, every percentage point does matter. When it comes down to it, will a Republican who tells you in early June that they don't like the former president anymore because he was convicted, when it comes down to getting into a voting booth or filling out an absentee ballot, will that matter? I don't know. Behaviors change, as we know, when they get to the actual vote. But just that trend alone is something to give concern to the Trump campaign.
Well, you say it so well because in a close election, and they, couldn't have found a closer election, I think, than the last one. They come down to like 48,000 votes, and so.
And it was rigged.
Yeah, oh, right. Aside from the rigging, and by the way, that's the way you want to rig it, right? Close. If you rig it super one-sided, then it's like then it looks rigged. right?
Yeah, and also make sure you don't rig any of the House elections.
You're right. You don't
None of those
really
were
want
rigged.
control.
The one where we won the House, that one wasn't rigged.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting because, yeah, it only has to be sort of true for it to have an effect on the outcome of the election.
Yeah, and that is the bottom line. That's why and you can't, if you're Donald Trump, you can raise money off of it from your minions, but you cannot raise political momentum off of it. Had he been acquitted across the board with an exclamation point that way, then he would have gotten the money and the political momentum from it, and that's where the difference lies. People said, "What is People asked me all week that week, well, what does it matter? What's the impact of the conviction? The impact of the conviction is far less than the impact of an acquittal would have been in terms of what it did for Trump. So I think that's really important.
The debate is upcoming. How
Yeah.
important is that?
I think it's important for Democrats to see their president debating. I think that, for a lot of Democrats who watch President Biden, it's a little like watching, Olympic figure skating. Just get through this routine and don't fall, please. And that's a terrible way to have to watch a candidate, but it's how people watch an 81-year-old candidate. And I've said this before too. It's how people watch. Have watched Joe Biden for a long time. I mean, this is not a new phenomenon of Joe Biden not being a great debater. We've discussed that here too. And so I think there's a little bit of that. But also, will he be able to articulate why getting off this horse right now is a mistake and why his opponent is a danger to America? Yeah, those things are important. There's a long lapse between the June 28th debate and the next debate. And I think that one, so I don't think that whatever happens that is not good. I think this was a smart play by the president, by the Democrats, to have this space between the debates, because if he does make mistakes, and same for Trump, if he does have a bad performance, as he is prone to do himself, he just sort of in sort of vigor, he's able to overcome more than the president is. I think that space will mean that the first debate probably not as impactful as the second one will be.
I want to turn to Mike Johnson, the GOP House Speaker, who is throwing bones to Trump, it would seem, and the right-wing caucus. He just appointed Scott Perry, the Republican from Pennsylvania, and Ronnie Jackson in Texas to the two open slots in the House Intelligence Committee. So you've got MAGA access now, and I'm talking about election-denying, full-blown, wearing the stripes on the shoulders MAGA people who have access to highly classified government material. I'm wondering if this is just, I hate to use the phrase, but the new normal.
It's the new election year normal. It's the old election year normal, right? You give to the national candidate what the national candidate wants. Ronnie Jackson's not just MAGA. He's someone who worked as the president's doctor, is the one who gave the glowing report of never has there been a more fit U.S. president. He is partisan full on, but he won on his own, in his own right, a seat in Congress. I think also, one of the roles of the Speaker of the House is the fundraiser in chief, basically, of the party. And Mike Johnson knows how he has to win over MAGA supporters in the wake of people wanting to challenge him, the Freedom Caucus sort of being opposed to him, Scott Perry, a big figure in the Freedom Caucus. So I think that there's part of it is fundraising. Part of it is knowing that he's got to go into districts to raise money for the Republican Party for the House election. And if he has real MAGA people vouching for him, as Perry and I assume Jackson will, then it makes it a lot easier to raise that money. And the president, or the former president, but the national candidate for the party, will also not sort of needle him on the campaign trail, which doesn't help the party.
I love that you mentioned the Freedom Caucus, because you're right. It was a huge campaign by the Freedom Caucus to get him onto the panel. I'm talking about Perry.
Yeah.
There's a quote in here from Byron Daniels from Florida. The FBI investigation has us BS over January 6th, which is part of the problem that we have at the FBI. So if there's more oversight of the FBI, that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Right, and Byron Donald's also a Freedom Caucus member, also obviously Floridian, campaigning, some people say, for the vice presidential slot, but I think geography makes that difficult. But here's the thing, right? I mean, Johnson has to quell the storm in the House, no matter what. Like, that has to happen. That's part of his, in order to get anything done, that has to happen. I think many Republicans who didn't want to see Perry and Jackson on the Intelligence Committee are saying, well, look, why go through the clown game here if we are trying to hold on to the House, right? If we are trying not to seem extreme. I don't know, though, that there's a real trickle down to the average voter on, oh, well, the appointment to the Intelligence Committee by that person from another state, that doesn't matter to most voters, right? What does matter is, in the big picture, the fundraising that he can get by now having MAGA dollars available to the National Party.
I just think about, Perry was involved. There's still an open investigation into Perry on the 2020 election subversion, right?
Yeah, there is. I mean, he's
it's a federal investigation.
He's not a favorite, but federal investigations don't seem to bother that crowd.
Well, in that spirit, I wonder what will happen with the fake electors, Michael. Even some of these fake electors who were ready to, legitimately pull off something illegitimate.
Right. I think criminally, things are going to happen with them. And I don't think they're going to happen on the same schedule that a lot of people who want to see them really suffer are going to want, right? I don't think that schedule is there. But you have to realize, just by our talking about this, by turning on the TV in the evening and flipping through the channels and hearing about this stuff constantly, it is the background noise to the 2024 election. And that's not something in any way that can help the Republican candidate, the Republican Party, win over the people that they need to win over. The people they've already won over, those are in their back pocket. But the people that they're trying to win over, this background noise, even if it isn't a trial, even if it isn't an indictment, even if it isn't something that is concrete, the continual beat of this will be the metronome of this election. And I think that's bad enough for the Republicans.
Such an interesting point, because we all sort of await for the paper to be served, the indictment paper, but it's not necessarily the thing. Oftentimes getting into the public discourse is the thing. But I just want to mention, for those who are not aware, the Wisconsin Attorney General, and Wisconsin is a key state, this week filed charges against 3 of these fake electors. Kenneth Chesborough, by the way, this is Chesborough himself, I don't believe, was a fake elector, but he was participating in the scheme to put forward the fake electors.
Yeah, very much so.
Chesborough was the attorney. He devised the fake elector plot, essentially. Also, another Trump lawyer and a former Trump campaign official, all facing indictment. And again, as I say, charges filed just this week against those 3. But boy, it did take them a while to get to it, Michael. So
it did, but it's a drumbeat, right? And like I was just saying, it's not going to just disappear. It may not have a resolution in time on the calendar the way that a lot of people want that to happen, but it's not going to disappear either. And it's going to be, like I said, the background music to this entire year for Republicans running in the House, Republicans running locally, and for the presidential race.
It's hard to believe, just as I think I'm going to lose you here in a second. So I have 5 more minutes, or what do I have?
We have 5 minutes.
Okay. It's hard to believe that, boy, if Trump does prevail, all of this washes away. I mean, this scheme, essentially, to take over government illegally just washes away. It's a remarkable fact, that we really will be entering a different, this is my opinion, just a different kind of deep space that we've never been in, in the modern age.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big if and a big then there. And so I don't you can talk about the if, but I don't think we really know what the then is, because a lot of these federal charges and a lot of these state charges especially, there's very little for him to do other than have it perhaps postponed, and other than seeing some states say it's unseemly to be doing this to a U.S. president. But there's also going to be a lot of motivation behind doing that. And one thing you have to remember, too, is when Trump is a lame duck president 2 years into his presidency, maybe even earlier, Republicans are going to have an easier time running away from him than they do now.
The D-Day memorials, did you take anything from them? The 80th anniversary of D-Day, the solemnity of the occasion is always so intense, I think.
Go ahead. I mean, it's beautiful, and it's I think apolitical, as apolitical as it can be, even though politicians go. I think that it reminds us all of a time that we don't have anymore, where there is, you can bemoan that stuff and get corny and sappy about it, but the mere fact is that we haven't had something that has unified the country like that did in a long time.
I also look at the alliances that exist today as a result of World War II, the post-Soviet alliances that are always being tested, and now all of this is being tested in ways that it hadn't been before. Of course, the last president, Donald Trump, was talking openly about getting out of NATO, about the NATO alliance members not paying enough, et cetera, for their protection. It was sort of like a mobster complaining out loud about the international participation of his mob in protection.
Right. Yeah.
Do you, as you look ahead, I know international politics is sort of an adjunct to a lot of what you do, but you do know a lot about this and this history. Are you optimistic, or what do you think?
I mean, I think there's reason to be optimistic. Look, when you see shows of this, and unfortunately things don't endure like they used to, right? So we're not going to be talking about Normandy in a day, right? And it's just that has passed. We had D-Day, we celebrated it. But when in Europe and in the United States and Canada, when they see these displays of what happened in Normandy, I think that and you see how close it is in Poland between the left and the right, how Hungary has gone in the direction, a very right-leaning direction, Austria too, that there are grumblings in Germany and the Netherlands. And you see something like that, it makes you step back and say, okay, maybe we're not going to be going in that direction. I think a lot of the rank and file, a lot of the younger people in Europe and Eastern Europe remember that, are told that, but also see that now because they don't remember it from way back then. And so I'm sure it has an effect, and I can only imagine a positive effect.
Find Michael across the webverse and here on Fridays, and of course watching the Stanley Cup playoffs tomorrow. You're so generous with your time. Really appreciate it, my friend. Michael Shure, everybody. Right. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.